Hello, friends. This is Chandrakant from Akulmac Technologies. Welcome to Top Brass. We are discussing oil price crash today, and I have done some analysis, and I want to bring it to for you. And I also welcome your comments and any ideas that you have. So, first of all, we will analyze in today's episode why the oil prices crashed and what are the reasons behind this crash. So before we go into depth of this, I think it is important for all of us to also understand that how this crude business works. Not in too much of detail, but at least we should know the basics. So first off, the crude is basically drilled out, and why we call it crude because it is drilled out by using the machinery and put in something called barrel, because historically the barrels were used to store the crude which is straight away coming out from the ground, and then the countries who want to use this crude and produce different products by refining this crude oil can take the barrel, and so it is very nicely stored and it can be shipped and it's very sturdy. So today the crude oil is actually purchased in the form of barrel. So the price that is determined for crude oil is it's basically per barrel, and all the oil producing companies basically have the pricing in terms of number of barrels that each countries buy. Now this is the basic fundamental of why we actually what is the unit of crude, and while every country use petroleum products. In fact, all the countries have cars, machinery. Certain countries have heating systems where there are the cold climate, etc. Everywhere, the crude petroleum products are used. So it is important to say that there is a global market and there is a global need. And since the crude is sold without being refined by certain countries to rest of the world, each country which is a consumer, the consumer side of it, has their storage facilities. So while the oil is produced and shipped to consumer countries, and the consumer countries, some of them have refineries in their countries, and they have the storage uh, arrangement for the different products and also crude. Now, all these countries cannot store lot of material because there is a production on one side and there is a consumption on the other side. So each country, consumer country, has exact knowledge of what is that their requirement is for next number of days. Say, for example, if we look at India, we have a consumption of 4 million barrels on a day. About four not accurate, but something like 4 million barrels in a day is a requirement of India. So India has a lot of refineries, as we know. So I'm not going into depth of where the refineries are, how they do things, etc. But there are refineries. So when we buy crude, we have storage capacity, and we have roughly storage capacity of about 15 to 20 days. Let's say, I don't know for sure how much storage we have, but let's say 15 to 20 days is the storage capacity. So we know that our consumption is 4 million barrels a day, and our storage is 15 days. That means 4 million into 15 days is what we store at any point in time in India, so that the machinery keeps running. And we also know that there is a production which is also happening, and we give this number to the oil producing countries so that they can start shipping those to India as per the requirement, as per the order. Now, I gave you all this information just because and any country has their requirement, and they know that the next lot of crude will be required after 20 days. So it doesn't matter whether I take the crude which is required after 20 days now or after 20 days. It doesn't matter, because I should have the storage. If I have the storage, I will get the crude. If I don't have the storage, I cannot store extra crude. There is no facility available beyond whatever storage I have. So hence, the crude oil is always purchased in futures. So there is, I don't need it today. I as a country, I may need it after 15 days. So I will quote a price to the production facility that I will pay you XYZ per barrel after 15 days. So this is how the rolling business happens. And certain countries will have a storage capacity for only 5 days. So their futures will be after 5 days. And certain countries may have futures after 30 days if they have a higher storage capacity. So the whole thing boils down to how much storage capacity each country has who are consuming these products, and how much shipment can be made by the production countries like Saudi, Iran, US, Russia, how much they have to drill the petroleum out, pack them into barrels each day. So they have the complete requirement that today this is these many barrels I have to ship to these countries, and these many barrels I have to next day, and so on and so forth. So it's a very set business. It's a very global business. It's very system oriented, and the pricing is always in futures. Um, but what has happened now? Nobody had predicted that COVID pandemic will last for so long. So while the people who actually do business of crude, it's very complicated. I don't have complete knowledge of how these pricing is done, how the pricing for each barrel is set, etc. It's very complicated. So we are not going into that aspect of this discussion. We are saying that why the price crashed by so much. So the pandemic lasted for more than 2 months now, and we have no end date visible when the pandemic will end. So obviously, what is happening? There are no flights, there are no shipping, there are no cars, there is no machinery which is working, no factories operating. So whatever each country has in store is still in store. It has not gone out. It is not being utilized. So when it is not being utilized, even though as a country we have given a price in futures, we cannot take that crude because we promised on that day that we will pay you so much and we'll get this crude, because I cannot store it. So, when there is no storage facility in India or in United States or in Russia, how they can store that crude if they buy it? So the consequence of this whole pandemic is that no country is buying those crude. And which are the major consumer countries? So needless to point out, there are 4 or 5 major consumers in the world, which is US, China, India, Russia, and Brazil. So these are the countries which are actually buying a huge quantity of petroleum from the petroleum production countries like Iran, Iraq, Saudi, US, Russia. So now this is the issue now, when the countries are not able to store whatever they need, there is no way they can buy the crude. And once they are not able to buy this crude, the oil producing countries had to come out with a mechanism where they can stop the production. So what has happened? Logically they should have. But the problem lies in the agreement between them. And today, if you look at the oil business, majority of it is actually handled by Russia as well, apart from the Middle East countries. And within Middle East, there are 2 major suppliers. One is Saudi, other is Iran. And obviously, all these countries have some issues. And US is also one of the big production countries. They have their oils in Texas. At the same time, a lot of companies are drilling oil for all other countries. So the US also has major interest in crude oil production. So let's say if the US has to drive certain strategy globally, obviously the oil economy plays a major role in making sure that the world operates the way it is today. So what has happened? Why the price? Logically, they should have stopped the production to ensure that there is no extra crude available in the oil producing countries. So obviously these guys have to sort their issues out. And what is public knowledge? We don't know what really happened, what transpired between them. The public knowledge was that the Saudi crown prince had some discussion with Putin. And that discussion did not go well. And they agreed on not stalling the production. And when they did not stall the production, obviously there is imbalance in demand and supply. The demand is not asking for any new oil anywhere in the world, and the major countries are China and India, Brazil. Obviously, everything is in lockdown, so all these countries are not demanding. US obviously is not demanding because they are also in lockdown, while they are also one of the major interest holder in the crude business, global crude oil business. So if there is no agreement between the oil producing countries, the production of the oil continued. They kept them into barrels and they kept stacking till the point they ran out of the storage facility in their own country. So when once something is not being stored, what happens? It goes waste. If you have a some sort of a bumper crop, say in US there is a bumper crop. What happens is, we have all heard as children that the American farmers are not able to sell their produce, so they are actually throwing that in the ocean. So this is what has happened. If the production has not stalled, the demand is not there, the crude which is produced, which cannot be used without being refined, it is just lying and there is no storage available anywhere. So the price within one day crashed by $50. And there's another issue here, which is related to the geopolitical scenario in the world today. If the per barrel price is in the range of $100 or above $100, suddenly the economy of certain countries like Iran and Russia looks very, very, very big. And Iran and Russia as countries look like as if they're controlling the global economy, and suddenly they look like superpowers because their GDP and everything is grows tremendously. But right now, the crude per barrel price has gone down as low as $37. So I think there is a geopolitical scenario which is emerging, and oil is being used uh, to ensure that the power of certain countries is curtailed. They do not have too much of money because the oil business is constitute the major portion of their respective GDPs. And suddenly Iran and Russia, whose GDP is majorly dependent on the crude oil business, looks very, very small. So I think this is what has happened, and ideally, with all logical brains being behind this business, they should have stopped the production, but they have not. Consequently, the price has crashed. So this is what my analysis says for this week, and I welcome all the comments and inputs from my viewers. Please let me know what you think about this. We will meet next time. Until then,